pretend that this does not happen every month. Every woman spends approximately 2,100 days of her life menstruating. It's equal to 6 years. But yet, a lot of us hide it or pretend that it's something that does not visit us monthly. Menstruation is not a disease, and I think it's time we stop treating it like one. Have you seen how shopkeepers carefully pack our stay-free packets in newspapers, sometimes 2 newspapers, and in a black bag, as if, they're scared that the whole world and all the sacred knowledge in it would just get corrupted with a single view of our sanitary napkin packet. It's like men would cringe if they hear it out aloud. I'll be honest, I'm 26, and till quite recently, I didn't know how tampons work. I just didn't, and I didn't know who to ask. I never asked anybody. I was just too shy to ask. But eventually I figured out, thanks to the internet. And so yeah, I think we can say it out loud. You can say menstruation. It's a good feeling. Somebody wants to try it? Say menstruation.
Ladies here, they should.
Yeah? Will anybody say it for me, please?
Menstruation.
A little louder, probably?
Menstruation.
That's right, because the louder we say it, the more chances Indian girls have to improve their menstrual health and hygiene. There are girls in our country who have no information about their own menstruation cycle, the process, the purpose, the biological process, and the purpose. In a study of 747 girls across India, about 97% do not know the source of menstrual bleeding. It's not a surprise that most women have inadequate knowledge of hygiene and complete lack of access to sanitary care. Menstruation is not a dirty word. It's not something to be embarrassed of. But what we should be ashamed of is that 57% of Indian girls remain absent in school because they do not have separate washrooms to take care of their personal needs, because their teachers and mums still think menstruation is dirty and polluting. As girls reach puberty, they tend to miss 4 or 5 days of school in a month, approximately 50 a year, due to inadequate menstrual protection. But those are the lucky ones, because almost 23% girls drop out of school when they start menstruating. Disposal of sanitary materials is a problem because of lack of formal waste management systems in schools and homes. India accounts for 27% of the world's cervical cancer deaths, for which poor menstrual hygiene is partly to be blamed. 285 million Indian women still use cloth. Of these, most of them reuse cloth. Around 70% of them dry the cloth in the shade, thus increasing chances of infections and illness caused by use of unhygienic cloth. Hay, mud, and other ineffective and, of course, very unhygienic alternatives to sanitary napkins that can lead to long-term health risks like, again, RTIs, toxic shock syndrome, and cervical cancer. All this because we have made menstruation a burden, a dirty secret. So let's not murmur anymore. Let's speak up and say it out loud. Menstrual hygiene and education is the need of the hour, and what we need to do is to bring the issue to the fore and talk about it, and to put money where its mouth is and be the driving force behind this change. Today, in front of you all, Stay Free takes an oath to educate 100 million Indian girls by 2018. The personalities on our panel today. We have today Sinu Joseph, who is a counselor and menstrual hygiene educator, has been working on the subject for over 5 years now, largely in rural areas, and has personally undertook sessions for over 10,000 adolescent girls. Her work on menstruation revolves around 2 main aspects: spreading awareness on menstrual hygiene and enabling adolescent girls to overcome their inhibitions around menstruation, and helping rural or tribal communities unearth the inherent menstrual wisdom through a deeper understanding of cultural practices. She's also the founder of My3 Speaks, a trust that works on issues pertaining to women and children, especially menstruation, and has created an animated film in 2013, which I watched, called My3, which is now available in 7 languages. and is distributed free of cost in government schools across India. The film has been shared with the Education Department and the National Rural Health Mission with the potential of reaching 4 million adolescent girls year after year. Her trust has trained other NGOs, government school teachers, and ASHA, who are the government health workers, on conducting sessions on menstrual health in schools. Her blogs on the topic have reached over 150 countries and over 5 lakh people. In June, she will be visiting Boston, wherein she has been invited as a key speaker at the International Conference of Menstrual Health and Reproductive Justice, where she will be presenting papers on ground reality of menstrual health in India. Along with imparting awareness on menstrual hygiene, she is also working parallelly on researching the origin of menstrual practices in India. Last year alone, she traveled across 8 states in India to understand the cultural practices around menstruation. Dr. Leena Asher, Dr. Leena Asher, she is founder and chairperson of Kangaroo Kids Education. She has been acknowledged as one of the top 50 leaders who have redefined Indian education. An educationist, Dr. Asher, Leena Asher has been most concerned about learning-centric teaching methodology.
That most embarrassing story that we would otherwise really cringe to even think about.
Okay, let's do this. Gul, would you like to tell us about your personal experience?
It's another unremarkable experience. I learned about menstruation from classmates because I think my mother thought the time will come when she'll tell me and somehow things didn't happen. So most of us actually, most of my peers learned about it through older siblings or through their own classmates in school. And by the time I finally got my period, I was very much aware of it. And strangely, it was something that made you feel more grown up in my peer circle. And all kinds of misinformation was given out. In fact, finally, I had to go and ask my mother, please explain to me what periods are. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. But it's one of those things that are inconveniently not discussed in most homes. And that was when I was 11 or 12. I'm 10 years older than Kritika. So even then, it's just that it's something that we don't feel comfortable talking about in any environment. Our mothers have conditioned us to not speak about these things in front of our fathers. So as a result, it's something that nobody must know about in the house. That's the kind of sense I got. Although it was never said in these many words, but my sense of how people view menstruation or how people view periods for girls is something that mustn't be spoken about. In fact, I don't even recall there being anything in terms of information being made available on hygiene and health. So the only thing we were told was, you will get your period once a month, you have to use sanitary pads. That's it. So I thought, in fact, I consider myself a well-informed woman, and I learned so much in our brief interaction earlier with Dr. Anita, because there's so many things we just are completely unaware of. Even though we may have access to things like sanitary pads, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Whether it's usage of cloth or any other traditional means, the issue here is knowledge of menstrual health and hygiene. What means you use during your period, during your menstrual cycle is secondary. The bigger issue is how to maintain menstrual health and hygiene. And I thought, there just wasn't enough being done. Schools don't do anything about it in my time. And there just wasn't enough information available. In fact, one found that mothers also, beyond a particular point, beyond telling you use a pad and this is what it's for, it now means you become a grown-up girl. And I mean, that's just one part of it, the fact that it's the onset of reproductive maturity or the beginning of the process of reproductive maturity. But the issue here is the larger issue, even among aware urban families, of health and hygiene is just never discussed, which I'm sure Dr. will enlighten us more about. So for me, this has been personally has been quite a aware morning already. And I think by the time I walk away from this panel discussion, I will definitely be more aware. But my parting note on this particular question of personal experiences, I wish there was more people talking about it. I wish more younger girls felt comfortable discussing it. They shouldn't have to feel embarrassed just because they're menstruating. This attitude of society to make girls feel embarrassed, hide, feel that menstruation is a taboo needs to be done away with if you're going to want to encourage health, not lose girls, to easily preventable illnesses or even things that go further into reproductive tract infections, UTIs, and of course cervical cancer as well. So I think the more we talk about it, the better it becomes because girls begin to finally believe it's okay to speak about it. It's not a taboo. It's not something we should be embarrassed about. We shouldn't be inhibited about talking about it.
Right. So we're going to come back to all that we need to do and how education is important, but we will finish the round of personal experiences first. So, Dr.
My
Soni,
turn?
Yes, your turn.
All right. I have been blessed because, I mean, I'm surrounded here with people who have not had enough exposure, but by virtue of the fact I'm a gynecologist's daughter, I knew all about periods before I actually got them. I attained menarche at about the age of between 10 and 11, which is the going age even today, and I'm years older than all of you. I still menstruate, and I'm very happy about that. But we were all aware of menstruation when we were growing up, because as a gynecologist's daughter, we were taught, or I was taught, on every single aspect of menstruation before the teachers or the school told us. In our school, which was JB Vacha at Dada, we had a class which was conducted, and we used to have a doctor who came and taught us on mothercraft, which the earlier part of the year would cover menstruation, hygiene, and the works. So that's why I said I am blessed. Today, I think for the last 6 years, J&J can hold me out on that. We have been conducting programs all over the schools of Bombay, where I personally cover Vikhroli, Powai, and that area because I stay there now. And we go to the schools and teach them right from what is menses to what care you can take. Unfortunately, Indian culture goes as menses chi gandagi nikal rahi hai. The woman is to be is untouchable at that time. Actually, it is the crying of the uterus from a loss of a pregnancy. That's all that it is. And so the fact that you've become an adult, you have to educate the child more on what it is rather than telling her, chi, it's dirty, or keep yourself clean during that. All you got to tell her, yes, there are hygienic areas which need to be maintained, but beyond that, you don't have to frighten the child over it. My own daughter, I mean, the day she started menstruating, she comes up to me, we were watching the IPL in the hall, and she said, Ma, I think I've done it. So it was like an achievement of sorts, but we've been talking about it, and most of the girls in the urban area are today being educated by the net, the peers, and of course, doctors like us who are making visits to the schools and routinely teaching them on menstruation.
You truly are really blessed because I'm from a really small place in MP, and we didn't have any such classes, or even if we went up to someone, say a teacher, I'm sure nobody would have helped. So if my mother didn't tell me, I would not have.
That was the advantage of being in a place like Bombay, and coming from a school where it was a Parsi school, and they were really very hell-bent, though we were only girls there.
Yeah.
They were very hell-bent on us getting all our information intact before we went out of school. So we had this lady who'd walk in, and 3 years, 8th, 9th, and 10th, we had 3 different stages where one, they spoke to us on menstruation, the second they spoke to us on mothercraft, which would be delivery, labor, sex, all of it. And by the time we left school, we were aware of everything as far as sex education went.
Brilliant. Tina? What?
You know, they say that it's thanks to what we're speaking about today.
Yeah. So I'm sure we all meet different kinds of people every day. You guys, your clients, and the adolescent girls that you have educated. Why don't people talk about it? What are the basic, like, why is it such a taboo? Why are people scared of it? And what are they thinking? What kind of like different theories and stories have you heard?
I heard a lot of stories. See, when we talk of what India thinks culturally of menstruation, it's very different from what we know of it today. Because originally, we come from a culture which revered menstruation, which thought of menstruation as giving women superpowers. In Manipur, I met women, elderly women, who in their first period had actually tasted a drop of the menstrual blood because it was thought to give them a lot of positive powers and ability to heal themselves. On the other hand, in Jharkhand, I came across women who were looked upon as Dayans, that is witches. And it was thought that if their menstrual cloth is found, it can be used for black magic. So the fundamental core of it was still that menstruation is a very powerful thing, but it has been taken in two different directions. One, it led to a lot of beliefs around women having powers and therefore condemned. And on the other hand, it led to a more practical thing of, okay, it's just impure and let's just not talk about it. We have to dig deeper whenever we hear these theories, because a lot of what we know of it today is not what we culturally thought of menstruation. If you take any practice, whether it is not going to the temple, not cooking food, not touching others, not washing your hair, all of these had Vedic explanations. It is a part of a research I'm still doing, and I think I know very little about Ayurveda to actually talk about it, but it is enough to say that they came from very positive spaces and they were never meant to suppress. Though hygiene and products are important, we need to go beyond it. We need to talk about the purpose of menstruation in a positive light, and that is when the conversations will change.
Well, in your circle around you are people, or when you were growing up, you were very cool about it, you knew it all, but was there that one girl in the class who went into a shell? I remember there was one in my class who I think got her period, she was the first one to get it. And then, yeah, she just became really like, I mean, it's fine, everybody told her that she's grown up and she started behaving like she's grown up, but she went into a shell, she became an introvert and she stopped talking. I don't know whether it was because of what people told her, how she felt herself, but were there any...
I was in a boarding school and a lot of knowledge gets very easily passed, also misknowledge and incorrect information gets passed around. So we all appear to know about it, but we also thought that we were expected to display certain physical and mental symptoms. So,
Like?
For example, cramps when See, even if you didn't have cramps, you're like, oh, I'm cramping. Because these are things that everybody spoke about.
Yeah.
And I mean, you'd have girls who would get themselves excused from classes because we had a building we stayed in a building we went to classes to attend. So there'd be girls who would say, oh, I need to be excused from classes. So I think there was a lot of misinformation around. Also PMS, and girls would feel entitled to snap and leave because they were PMSing. Because I think psychologically there is so much built up around it that you begin to psychosomatically, is that the correct word? Believe in those symptoms, and it just sort of, it's one of those things where you may not be feeling it actually, but because the entire dorm is feeling like that. Because it's another interesting thing about menstruation when a group of girls together. Is it true, Doc, that menstrual cycles tend to merge and align themselves? Because I do know that by the time we would go back home after say a term, a lot of us were within the same time. So I don't know if there's any scientific backing to
Really,
that.
is it?
But it's again, it's one of
I
those
can
things
tell you
that-
traditional stories about that.
Okay.
Because there was a belief that all women menstruated at the same time with the new moon. All women.
It's interesting because, and this is really bizarre, but animals have a cycle. Yes. It's fixed. So for those of you who have dogs, I don't know, I mean I have two beagles, it's a fixed time of the year. So they will come and eat once in season, once, around, in order to deliver during June, July, or during December, Jan. So almost all litters are actually born during Jan and December with dogs. So I don't know, Doc will have to give us information on how that works with humans, but so much misinformation, just hearsay, ki ye bhi hai, wo bhi hai. But I think the larger point that, Seema and you guys are discussing about why we don't talk about it. See, I think what Seema said made a lot of sense. We need to move above, of course, hygiene and health is very, very important, but the purpose of menstruation is also very critical, which fortunately or unfortunately is linked to sex education. That's not something that we as a society are yet comfortable talking about. Even though traditionally, and Seema would probably again give you stats and more knowledge on that, Traditionally, we've been a very open society. We celebrate reproduction, we celebrate birth, we celebrate women. But we've come today through some process to a stage where we don't celebrate women. We do not celebrate their power, their reproductive might, the fact that they are special, and the fact that it's that's something that has to happen. And we cannot hide it. So just the way we run away from sex education, a natural corollary of that is that we don't want to talk about menstruation. And things that you don't speak about openly will eventually have information disseminated through hearsay. And that's the problem. Information that should be easily available, easily accessible, whether it's sex education or menstrual health and hygiene, is therefore gained through hearsay. Somebody is telling you they're not even qualified because their sources are unqualified. So I think the problem begins with the fact that we consider so many subjects to be taboo. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's open to debate. But the issue is the inhibition surrounding the larger reproductive space in our society in present times. I'm sure things were different earlier on, but it stems from us being inhibited about reproduction and therefore being inhibited to talk about anything to do with menstruation.
I absolutely agree with you. So, doctor, finally, now the facts. I mean,
What is a menstrual
yeah,
cycle?
yes.
There are two parts to a menstrual cycle. One, the shedding of the lining of the uterus, which you see as blood. The second, one egg every month. Now, all of you men have got millions of sperms, and you need one chappy to go and knock a lady pregnant. But as far as women are concerned, there's only one.
And this is the key question here, that everybody in urban areas has access and uses sanitary pads for their periods. Now, this is what doctor told me, and I had to have a really strong black coffee to recover from it. Please, doctor.
I can guarantee you we have a very big class or a large number of people who will use non-hygienic methods or unhygienic methods, like using a cloth but repeatedly using the same thing without being able to clean it properly. See, using a cloth is not wrong. Please don't get me wrong that I'm promoting use of a sanitary pad. That lower class of society, if it has to use a cloth, she's more than welcome to do it. But she has to wash it regularly, change it every 4 to 6 hours, dry it in the sun, which is extremely important. But menstruation is taboo. It is not something that she can do. So that is a dirty piece of cloth. She's not allowed to dry it or expose it to sun. She can't iron it with a hot iron. So how does she get rid of bacteria and fungi from it? So that is what is causing us a problem.
And it's also not a function of economic.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, there are sanitary pads which are available, which are relatively very, very cheap. And you will find women, and I can go on record saying this, they'd possibly wear solitaires in their ears and use the fanciest car to arrive to the hospital. And they will not use it. So, I mean, it is because they have been taught by their family, their grandmothers or mothers-in-law, that you can get away with this. It's true.
Leena, what do you have to say? I mean, what are your schools doing in terms of...
I'll tell you what I used to do.
Women don't know how often to change a cloth or a pad. And with products coming up with newer versions saying that you can use it for 12 hours and so on, they feel that using one sanitary napkin the whole day, especially if the menstruation is pretty scanty towards the 4th or 5th day, is perfectly fine. And this has been one big thing that needs to change. With school-going girls, especially in rural areas, you see when they use cloth, they're familiar with it because this is something their mothers and grandmothers did. So they would change it frequently. But if they were suddenly given a product which they haven't been educated on how to use, they actually think it's got some magical powers and use it for much longer. So that has been a problem that we've tried to change. With cloth, there are a lot of issues about how it is washed and dried, and this is not as much of a problem in rural areas because you have open spaces. Men talk more openly about menstruation in rural areas, so they actually dry it out in the sun. But in urban slums, this is a problem. women who migrate from rural areas and they settle in urban slums, you don't have the necessary space for it. And you have a huge cultural conflict from the way it was treated in a village versus the way it is in an urban area. And that is when compromises on hygiene start to happen. So the main thing about hygiene here, we need to remember how often you have to change it and keeping yourself clean. Keeping yourself clean during your period. This is very important.
Okay, that's basic. How can we impart knowledge, Gul, on a personal level, like, maybe on social media, internet, or how do we do it?
I think the starting point needs to be initiating conversation, which is why I think we're all here today, and which is why I was very, very happy to support this initiative, because I think we don't talk about it enough, and that's the gist of what everybody has been saying here. Even though culturally we had different routes approaching menstruation. So I think the starting point needs to be generation of more dialogue, more conversation, because only when you talk about something will you ask about it. So I have a thumb rule for any issue. I think the first thing you're going to do is discuss. When you start discussing something, which so far has not been spoken about, it comes into the forefront. So even though you may be uncomfortable about it initially, the discussion process starts. Then a few people will debate it. So there will be, someone who will say, oh, but traditionally these were our things. As Sinu brought to light, there was a very valid reason to begin with why women couldn't go into temples. It has now been convoluted and brought to a point where, it's almost become sexist. That's the interpretation of it. So then debate will happen. So discussion, dialogue, debate, and then change happens. There's always a 3-stage process required to bring about any societal change, whether it's something as basic as trying to abolish sati. We required a law to stop people from burning women when their husbands died. Women were doing it voluntarily as well, but a law was required to actually stop sati by the British. So logically, the precursor to that law was people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Dayanand Saraswati, who spoke about the need to challenge these norms. So the first step is always discussion, discourse, dialogue, debate. Only once these 3 steps have been, it's a natural anthropological evolutionary cycle in any society with any issue. So when an issue needs to be taken out from the back, brought into the front, there is a life cycle like a butterfly has to go through for it to finally be free. And that is initiated through discussions like this. We have discussions, we have debates, we have discourse, and finally comes awareness, and then comes change. So we are sitting at a point where there is aggressive intervention by brands like Stay Free that are pushing the envelope. So that's where aggressive intervention comes and disrupts the natural process of change. So disruption is a very popular word for those of you who are in the tech business. I'm an entrepreneur, I have a tech startup. So the more disruptive you are in the current environment, the quicker your rate of acceleration of change is. So when brands come forward to do aggressive intervention is when you can accelerate the process of change and disrupt the normal cycle of dialogue, debate, discussion, and then change. So they become catalysts for change, so to speak. So of course it will still take time, but this intervention that they're doing and how we are all part of this, and our friends in the media will use the power of their pen to put the might behind this action, is when change will actually happen. And it is a process, again, anthropologically, any change in society needs 3 generations. That's 15 times 3, so 45 years, unless there is disruptive action and aggressive intervention.
So we have taken the first step in
Absolutely.
the right direction. Yeah.
Cool, but 45 years is hell of a lot of time. Yeah, none of us will be around then.
I know, which is the sad part, which is why more of us need to disrupt.
Yeah.
Everybody sitting in this room needs to play their part in disrupting this process. Because unless you disrupt it, the change works like this. First generation becomes aware. It then passes on that value system. And this is not just about menstruation or about sex education. It's about any change which challenges societal conditioning. So the first generation becomes aware, they ask, may not agree with the change. The next generation, their children, 15 years, of course, hopefully we're not giving birth in 15 years, but from an anthropological, sociological perspective, 15 years is considered a generation. The next generation begins to understand why the first generation was discussing and debating this, and the third generation is actually neutral and ready to adopt the change. So the third generation is where the benefit of the change will come. So let's say 30 years. I mean, 15, that 15 we can play with, but we have to disrupt the process and aggressively intervene to accelerate that change.
I have a little science to put in. Kind of solidifies, it is against your skin, gives you a dry feeling, and you tend to keep the pad on for longer than required. That
I
can
have a
give
question here,
rise to
Doc. So what you're
infection.
saying is irrespective of the saturation of the device you're using,
You please
whether
change
it's a
it.
pad or it's a tampon, you've got to
Got to
change,
change it.
4 or 6.
Between 4 and 6 hours is
But
the
6 is the
safest.
upper limit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've not been
See,
aware.
and then you said you were one of those. Then
This has been such a revelation for me.
we need to meet more often.
Is it the same for tampons?
It is the same for tampons too.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, shorter for tampons because they are
Admitted,
Yeah.
admitted now, admitted. You've also been aware today.
Yes.
And an interesting thing, because this only came to light when I was asked to speak today. So I sat with my maid in the morning and I'm asking her what she does, like in terms of hygiene they all stay in slums, so what do they do and how do they cope? And
Was she really shocked first? Was she okay to talk about it?
very close.
Oh.
So she was very comfortable to talk to me
Okay.
about it. And then I asked her about, because she purchases my sanitary napkins and hers. And I asked her about, because I was now starting to think about the cost around sanitary napkins. Like how does everyone afford it? And, interesting perception, and I won't name the brand. So she uses Stay Free because she said it was 27 rupees a packet. And she buys a more expensive packet for me because she thinks price equates with quality. So
Which
that
is
was
the biggest problem today. Which is really the biggest problem today because, unfortunately, the cotton ones disintegrate after a while. Beyond 4 to 6 hours, you'll find the cotton, it kind of crumbles, and there are times where you can find the cotton on your panty also, just because of the fact that you've been active and moving around, and the cotton has started crumbling. Whereas these thin ones do not have that problem. So, and those are the ones which are more expensive. But I, as a doctor, and I'm sure most gynecologists will say the same thing, would prefer to use a cotton sanitary pad in our kind of climate, which is more humid, than the more
so
expensive
I'm sure we've all
variety.
learned something. I have.
I have totally. This.
No, in fact, I wanted to add something to what Doctor said. It was very interesting because she's speaking scientifically and I'm thinking of all the traditional knowledge I've heard and how much there is a relation. Because traditionally too, the thing that they say is menstrual blood is completely sterile. There is nothing wrong in it. And whether we associate odor or whatever, it's only when it comes in contact with products which are not changed often enough. So if you go back to ancient times, which in some tribal areas they still follow, they don't use products. They sit in separate menstrual huts and they bleed into the earth. And
Can I add, there is a company which had come up with something which is called Alicia, or a menstrual cup. It used to be available a couple of years ago, and you could put it into, like a cap on the cervix, and they would collect menstrual blood and dispose it off, and all you got to do is wash it with soap and water and reinstill it or reinsert it into the vagina.
yeah, it can be used for up to 1 year. It's called the She Cup, available in India also. And a lot of people are taking to it because one of the biggest things we haven't spoken about with products is environmental damage. With sanitary napkins, that is a big area, big concern that we all need to think about. So while we do promote hygienic methods, we shouldn't do it at a compromising environment. I'm connected with the international community, and let me tell you one thing. In the Western world, everyone is turning eco-friendly. They're turning to reusables, they're turning to cloth, they're turning to She Cups. And India is already there. We need to really think carefully what we are trying to promote, because we can do the course correction now. We are environmentally friendly. We can do things wherein we don't have to damage the environment and yet keep hygiene in mind. So this is where we are really at an early stage and we can make the right decisions instead of going the way the other countries have, wherein they have majority of people damaging the environment, and now they're trying to say, no, reusables are good. So this is something we need to keep in mind. We have an advantage here.
Great. So I've been asking all the questions. I think if it's time we open the floor. Questions. Anybody here has any questions to anyone? Yeah.
Hello. Hi. My name's Mansi, and I run a blog, and I have wellness as a topic in it. I don't know if all of you know it, but there was recently a big controversy on Instagram about a lady posting a picture of her menstruating, and it was taken off. It was, well, Instagram asked her to take it off. So one of my questions is it only an Indian thing? I mean, obviously, if Instagram is saying take it off, it's something that everybody is uncomfortable with. I don't know who I'm particularly asking this to, but what do you judge on this? What's your take?
I'd
on
actually
it?
asked this question to doctor before this, when we were sitting, and I was just getting as much information as I could on the subject. And I'm actually going to ask, the reason I wanted to say this, because this is a question I also had. I actually wanted to ask her, which I will ask again now, is how do our menstrual education awareness levels stack up compared to Western societies, A, and Eastern societies? Because we have to understand that we are an Eastern society, so culturally we are very different from, say, the West, which is a very, very open society. So I will allow doctor to answer that, but this is a question that I also had for her earlier. Culturally, menstruation has not been accepted as something which is sacrosanct or which is healthy, or it's something that nobody wants to talk about. Unfortunately, we are like a multicultural place, and as a Catholic, we never had any problems. We spoke about menstruation in schools. Our father knew that the child was menstruating, he'd bring my sanitary pads, and we were never stopped from church, or we received our communion. We did just about everything as a Catholic. I grew up as one, and I never had a problem with menstruation. But unfortunately, there are certain cultures which say, don't do this, don't do that, don't go into the kitchen, don't touch the idol, don't touch food. I mean, somebody said about negative energies and positive energies, but scientifically, I would not believe any of that. I think a woman is as clean as she is any other day, even when she's menstruating. As far as our education levels go, because we don't talk about it, people don't know anything. And they're living in a preconceived notion or a preconceived idea of the past, and we're living in our false glory. Compared to the West, people are more open. They do want to know. They do want to talk. So maybe they're more open to change than what we are today.
Sira, you're going to Boston for an international event on the same thing, right? So I'm sure it's being talked about everywhere. So it
Yeah.
is definitely.
See, there's a big difference in the way the West talks about it and the way we do. For them, it is a feminist issue. For us, we talk about it in terms of hygiene and sanitation. And therein lies the difference. I'm actually making a presentation on the ground realities in India and the cultural practices and what it means. In the West, they are moving, the feminism is moving to a situation where they're actually saying that it should be a free blood movement. Why should we use products? This is how nature meant it to happen. We should just bleed. If you just Google a free blood movement, you will see photos of women in Spain bleeding on white pants and saying, so what? So that is where they are. And we are at a stage where we have attached it so much to hygiene and sanitation. In fact, I was very shocked when I saw that menstrual hygiene management is very recently made a part of Swachh Bharat mission. Clean India, clean your environment, I understand, but clean your vagina? Seriously. So we are kind of losing track of what menstruation really is here by going too much into these aspects. I'm not saying that it is one or the other. I'm saying it's both. There is very clearly a hygiene aspect to it. There is a feminist angle to it. And one is the awareness of how to keep yourself clean, what to use, which I would probably agree with doctor in saying that it is more in the West. But if you look at the understanding of menstruation as a process of the positivity and what it's meant to do to women, I think traditionally at least India has a lot more of that knowledge. Any ancient society, India or Africa, has more of that ancient wisdom around menstruation than the Western countries.
So the
All right.
Instagram picture, I think, was more of feminism.
Can we have the last question? Anyone? All right, we're going to play a small video on menstruation education, and so we'll be playing a small video. Thank you.
What do I do when I get my first period? How to wear a sanitary napkin? Physical ones. Stress, anxiety, sleeplessness, those are some of the emotional symptoms. The physical ones, they could be bloating, acne, abdominal pain.
Hope
and
everybody
so on.
enjoyed the video. It's available on the YouTube channel.
And thank you once again for having you here. It was a pleasure. Thank you to all the panelists. It was wonderful to share your inputs and knowledge with all of us. And we definitely have something to take home with us. And thank you everyone for coming. The lunch is served outside. And thank you everyone.
मॉनिटर फ्रेम दिखाना प्लीज ओके It's a great initiative by Stay Free. I think menstrual hygiene and menstrual health needs a lot more awareness, and I'm glad that they've stepped forward to take aggressive intervention in this process and actually try and help create that awareness and education that's much needed. In our society, we don't talk about things that are to do with reproduction or menstruation because it's just considered taboo. People are too inhibited. So this is a great conversation starter, and I do hope they have more conversations like this, which in time to come will hopefully help us as a society to shed these inhibitions that surround an issue like this. Most welcome.
Thank you.